Some folks have jokingly called the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, BCRA, or McCain-Feingold, they've said what it really stands for is before campaigning, retain attorney. The law's purpose was always kind of vague, shifting. It was sold to the American people as it's kind of like a 19th century patent medicine. It's good for what ails you. If you think campaigns are too negative, you want McCain-Feingold. You think they're too long, you want McCain-Feingold. You think too much is spent, you want McCain-Feingold. You think they're too nasty, you want McCain-Feingold. You just hate politics, you want McCain-Feingold. And as a result, there was nothing, it's very tough to measure by any standard. But what was generally promised to people was that it would get money out of politics and it would kind of clean up politics. Now, how has that worked in a broad sense? I hardly know anybody who would say that those goals have been achieved or that BCRA has accomplished its goals. If anything, campaigns seem longer and more negative and more expensive than before. And in terms of corruption, the era of McCain-Feingold is the era of Bob Ney and Jack Abramoff and what was it, $70,000 or $90,000 in Congressman Jefferson's refrigerator in his office. You could say that the era of McCain-Feingold is an era of corruption in American politics as great as we've seen since Watergate. You can't stop citizens from coming together and spending money to talk about politics. And you have to understand a little of the background of the law. It points up the absurdity of the whole thing. The Supreme Court has held that because there's no corruption in sort of spending money, if I were a multimillionaire, I could just go out and spend my money, it's not going to corrupt a candidate. So an individual can spend as much as he or she wants on independent expenditures. A George Soros or a Bill Gates or someone can just go out and spend, if he wants, $1 million or $20 million to support a particular candidate. But according to the FEC, what they're arguing in court, is once that person gets together with someone else, then neither of them can spend more than $5,000 on the effort. This seems like a very odd rule, and it's one that infringes on freedom of association. And a lot of people would say, well, still that only really affects fat cats, who can afford to give more than $5,000, but part of the issue in speech now is that many of the members of speech now are small donors who cannot give large sums. And what gives their voice power, what allows them to be heard in the political system, is being able to join together with wealthier individuals who can contribute $100,000 or $50,000 into the campaign. That's what makes them heard. And that's what the current law prevents. But let me ask you this question. Imagine if George Bush were to announce here in the fading twilight of his presidency that in order to prevent terrorists from infiltrating American political parties and thus exerting control over American government, we need to introduce the Patriot II Act. And the Patriot II Act would require citizens to report to the government their political activities, and the government would keep that in a database, which, by the way, they would then make available to private individuals like employers or maybe groups that might want to protest outside your home as to what your political activities were. What do you think would be the reaction to that law? Well, I don't know. I know some people I think would support it. They think it was a great idea. I know on America's political left would go berserk. They would go absolutely nuts. Well, you know what? We have that law already, and it's called campaign finance. It's called the Federal Election Campaign Act, which requires you to report to the government, or requires the campaigns to report to the government people who give them money, right? And the government keeps that in a database, and they make that available to anybody can go online and look stuff up on the internet. There may be some benefits to disclosure of at least large contributions, but at a minimum, it seems like we don't need to be disclosing, every penny instantly over the internet. You hear people say that sometimes, even those who generally, as I do, favor deregulating in the system, but they're kind of like, but we'll disclose everything. And they usually pound the table to show how serious they are about this instantly, on the internet, every penny. And I'm like, no, we don't need every penny. We don't need it instantly. One of the things that disclosure also does, beyond the privacy invasion, is it's one of the toughest things for grassroots organizations, for true small-timers, political newbies, we might say, to comply with. For example, let's suppose I decide to start a little political committee and I'm going to, lobby on some state ballot issue, or I'm going to try to support candidates or whatever it is. It's pretty easy for me to grasp some of the basic rules. Okay, I can't take, maybe in the state, I can't take any corporate contributions. I can't take any contributions over $10,000 or $1,000 or whatever it is. Those are pretty easy rules to explain to the treasurer, and everybody knows them. What's hard is filing all the reports. That's what takes time and expertise, and that a lot of people have a great deal of difficulty doing. So these disclosure regimes further professionalize politics and make it harder for the average citizen to participate in politics. John McCain and I have really met on just one occasion, and Senator McCain had very often said, a number of things about me that I thought were often insulting and I think unfair, and I think it's too bad, because the funny thing is, a lot of the things that infuriate Republicans about Senator McCain are things I tend to be more in agreement with them on, and some of the things like immigration or the Gang of 14 on judicial elections and so on. But in any case, the one time I met Senator McCain, I met him at a congressional hearing, and I decided he was actually seated there waiting to speak, because as the senator he gets to go on the first panel because his time is valuable, and then as the FEC chairman I was on the second panel because my time is kind of valuable, and then ordinary citizens were relegated to the third panel. They had to wait through all the hearing before they could get up. So Senator McCain was waiting to speak, and I went up and thought I'd shake his hand and say hi, and he'd see that I don't have little horns, and it would break the ice, and we would be able to talk, because he had refused, he had been unwilling to meet with me, so I went up to talk with him, and I said, Senator, and he held out his hand, and kind of instinctively, and I took his hand, and when he looked up and he saw who it was, he yanked his hand out of mine. He said, I'm not going to shake your hand. He said, you're a bully and a coward, and you have no regard for the Constitution. And kind of berated me for several minutes. And this is not a story. This is the first time I've ever told a story on camera, and I don't normally tell it. I have a great deal of respect for Senator McCain as a bona fide American hero, as a man who has accomplished a great deal. But he doesn't need to be this way toward people who ought to be his sort of political allies on a lot of things. And I really think that he has a certain anger on this issue. I think in part because he really doesn't understand it, and so he just gets very frustrated with these people. Why are they opposed to me on this? It must be a sort of a personal thing on their part that they would do that, and I feel bad about that. But anyway, that's my relationship with Senator McCain. Senator Obama's decision not to take tax money in the campaign is portrayed by many as the death knell of the public financing system. That is the mistake that opponents of public financing or opponents of regulations have made over and over and over. And I hear them make it again and again, and every time I'm going to say, nope, this is not the death of it. I heard, September 11th was the death of McCain-Feingold. We got more important stuff to do. There were a couple different points when it was defeated in the House or in the Senate. People said, wow, this is the end of McCain-Feingold. When George Bush was elected president too, wow, this is the end of McCain-Feingold. I've heard this over and over, and I hear it now about public financing. It is not the end. The first thing people who believe in political freedom need to understand is that the opposition, the regulators, are relentless. They care about this issue. They care a lot about it. They see this as the key to their being able to impose their sort of, quasi-socialist, big welfare state agenda on the rest of society. Because if you can effectively muzzle the people who are upset by that agenda, you're more likely to get that agenda through. And they are relentless. They work 24/7. They will be there, and they will be back. Even now, they are working very hard and pushing very hard for now what they call full public financing of campaigns. They want to extend it to Congress. They want to extend it through the states. They've come up with this new name. They call it clean elections, because if you go to the voters and actually say, we're going to give candidates money to campaign, we're going to give them your tax dollars to campaign with, voters will vote against it. But if you call it clean elections and ask voters to vote for it, it's kind of like asking them to vote for a good economy or, warm, fuzzy rabbits or something. I mean, of course people are going to vote for it. They're pushing this. They're pushing it very hard. They're backed by big money, just as McCain-Feingold and the campaign to enact that wasn't backed by big money. And the curious thing here is they're using the failure of McCain-Feingold as proof that, well, we've got to have full government takeover of campaigns now, because obviously McCain-Feingold didn't work. So the only solution, trust us, is more regulation, more of the same. The fact that we're more heavily regulated than in our politics than at any time in our nation's history is just lost on them and not relevant.